Oh, name. Okay, yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, Janani. My name is Slesha Patel. I am now a full-time model.
So thank you so much for joining me today. I am so honored to have you for the Indian Standard. I feel like I've been wanting to talk to you for so long now, so I'm so glad that we made it happen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a huge honor for me to be able to have come as far as I have and have an opportunity and a platform like this one to share my story and hopefully help some of the Indian Standards readers and viewers with something that they might be dealing with.
Thank you. I mean, the premise of this whole thing is to share stories, right? Like the profound moment when you can be like, oh wow, I'm reading something that was like literally my experience.
Yeah.
And so I got that from our first conversation.
Yeah.
That you value those kinds of things too.
I really do.
I'm so honored to talk to you. But I want to get a little bit before we talk really deep about some of the things that may have happened in the brown community, the spirituality. I know that you're a really spiritual person.
Yes.
And you really value mental health too. And so before we get into all of that, I want to talk about your modeling career.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a nonprofit called Asha for Education. And when I was in high school, they were doing kind of talent show and fashion show type stuff throughout the country. So they would put on some sort of talent show, for example, in Kansas City where I grew up. And there would be a bunch of local performances, and they would bring through a designer to feature some of their designs and things. So basically my dance group is now called Seva Dance. And the word Seva means, giving back. And so it's always been a big part of what I grew up with. So Seva Dance was asked to perform at the Asha for Education talent show. So I performed on stage, and when I came off the backstage, there was a long hallway before you get to the lobby, and then you can go back into the auditorium. Right when I got off stage, the 20 of us girls came off, and there was an agent from a modeling agency that was running the fashion show that day, and she handed me a packet with a contract in it. And as I walked out to the lobby, there was a photographer waiting there, and he was like, hey, I'd love to pull you in on a few projects that I have coming up. And that photographer ended up helping me build my initial portfolio, and he ended up introducing me to the agency that I ultimately ended up signing with first.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you mentally know that you were going to be a model?
No, I always wanted to be a doctor, since I was a small kid, it's all I ever wanted. And I was like, I'm gonna be a doctor. And I went to med school starting at 18, I got my white coat. But the modeling industry is something that has always sort of pulled me in. I've always been asked to do opportunities and things, and I don't think it's because of anything other than destiny. I think that it was written in the stars, and so I think that even though I was a really shy, ugly kid growing up, I was destined for this. A lot of my cousins are models as well, so it is something that sort of runs in my family a little bit. But at every point when I tried to turn away from it, something always pulled me back. And there was one point in my life where I really wanted to kind of test it out a little bit. So before I started my master's program at Johns Hopkins for health administration, I had a little bit of a summer gap between when I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And I decided to go to an international modeling competition. So that was in 2015. I ended up winning the whole thing. And so it was when I won as one of the only South Asians in the entire competition. There were, I think, around 1,000 models. I won most fashionable, and then I won overall adult female model. And so I had a lot of contracts waiting for me, but it was commit the time to be a model, which is what all these big agencies expect. They expect you to have a time commitment, or go to my master's, which Johns Hopkins wasn't willing to let me defer. So I ended up continuing on with my master's in hopes that I could continue just doing it on the side as I had been. But life happens, and at a certain point, my agency was like, what do you think about going full-time now? And so I've been full-time for about a year now.
Wow. So it was would you say that it was a dramatic thing where you were okay, I'm a model now? It was an identity shift, or how did that work for you?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I feel there are so many tiers, right? I remember reading in magazines about Pooja Moore, who is one of the world's top South Asian models. And she is a tier 1 model, and she's been a tier 1 model for a long time. But I think there's a lot of people out there that maybe do 1 or 2 professional shoots, or maybe just have a couple of runway show experiences and call themselves a model. And there's a big difference between those two. I think if taking pretty pictures and doing 1 professional shoot made you a model, every high school senior in America would be a model. I think there is a shift, and there is a job description. And I think that a lot of people underestimate what being a full-time model or being even a part-time professional model really entails in relation to maybe what it's like to just do some opportunities here and there as they arise.
So what was that transition like for you?
I think that for me, it was pretty sudden actually, because like I think the opportunities exist out there. It just has to be that you're willing to commit the time. And so I think what happens is if you have other obligations going on, it's very, very hard to do castings and do self-submissions and really like be taken seriously by your agencies. So for me, I signed with a mother agency, it's Arizona Model Management, and they placed me at agencies all across the country. So I'm now signed in 16 states. This week, for example, I've had shoots every single day. I just came from one right before this. I have, we have our shoot tomorrow, but I also have another whole day, 8-hour day tomorrow as well. I'm really looking forward to Monday because it'll be my first day off in a month of just like constant back-to-back work. And a lot of that is because of Fashion Week. But even during Fashion Week, I had like either a show and a fitting or 2 shoots or 2 shows. Like everything was stacked. I had at least 2 things every single day. And it starts a week before with all the castings. So for the last like solid month, I've been like just very drained, but so grateful for it all because like it really is like my release, and it's truthfully what has allowed me to be so stable in my mental health. I think like without modeling, I probably would struggle a little bit because it forces me to keep my physical health in check, my mental health in check, my emotional wellness in check. And I think that like there's just so many things about the profession in itself that allow me to be the best version of myself.
It's a lot of things to keep in check.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think we all struggle with that, right?
Yeah, that's a lot.
There's a
of
lot.
things.
Yeah.
I mean, even having to show up and like you being your own brand, like constantly.
Yeah.
It's like you are your own CEO, you are your own boss. And even if you do have an agency, it's still your face that's kind of like, this is who I am, right? And like I am a model, and like that in the South Asian community is a very wild thing to say. Right?
Yeah,
Take it at a larger scope. Like it's not necessarily like being a creative is not the most normal thing.
No,
right?
not at all.
So tying all those thought processes together, like with everything that you do have to keep in check, how do you keep everything in check? And like, was there a point where you didn't?
Yeah, oh my gosh, so many points where I didn't. I think that I've struggled a lot with my mental health in the past. And so finding a way to kind of address each component of the struggles that I had within my mental health has been a huge part of my journey today and my success today. I think that there are a few techniques that have been really, really valuable for me that have really, really helped me be successful in this space. I think when you are a huge problem is like because you are your product and you hear no every day, it's like you can't take it personally. And so they're asking you to separate yourself from the product. And mentally, that's kind of a mess. And I think a lot of models talk about this struggle and this shift. But I think like being South Asian in this space is already such a rare quality that I'm just grateful to be in the casting in itself and to be considered for an opportunity, because I think the more and more of us there are South Asians in the space, whether they're on either side of the camera, whether they're, in hair and makeup, or they're in the video production or like photo production space, maybe they're set designers, maybe they're content creators or models themselves, actors. I think like just more of us in the creative space in general helps build on our subconscious bias, and it becomes more and more normal. And so for me, just like, even if I hear no, I'm like, thank you so much for even looking at me, for looking at my pictures, for taking the time for me to be able to do this casting. That in itself is a big deal because we still are a very directional choice for many casting directors and many brands. So I feel like, sorry, I kind of shifted the conversation a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that I said that.
The last thing you said was crazy. Like it's a very directional choice.
Yeah.
Like that is so profound. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, one of my male model friends actually and I were just talking about this today. And we were on set and we were talking about how he booked 5 shows. But during fittings, he was cut from some of those shows, and most of the talent that they selected were other minorities. And so like they felt like, maybe we shouldn't go with this brown guy, And I do think that sometimes I am like the token brown person on set. Like maybe they have like a girl with blonde hair. Maybe they have, you know, a girl that kind of reads Latinx. And then they have me, you know, and it's very like, you can see what the brand is trying to do. It's like, okay, diversity. And I'm not complaining about that in a sense, because like, thank God we have the opportunities to be in front of the camera, and we're not just like a side thought, oh, well, we considered these people. You know, at least I've gotten that opportunity to be able to say that, you know, I was there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you kind of hinted a little bit towards your mental health journey. Do you want to just take us through it?
Yeah, I'm just going to lay it down on you. Hopefully you're ready. So my symptoms started when I was about 15, 16 years old, and it's almost like they came out of nowhere. And I think that's one of the problems with mental health, and a lot of people don't understand what depression can really be. And for me, it felt like a chemical imbalance. Like there was nothing wrong in my life. I grew up fairly well off. I have a great family. I have a great relationship with everyone in my family. I was a happy kid. Like I maybe didn't have any friends at all in school, and I ate lunch underneath the staircase most days alone. But I mean, I had my Indian friends outside of school that I grew up dancing with. I had balanced activities in and out. I had interests, I had hobbies. I loved going to school and just like learning and actually doing homework even, you know, like when it was like, when you feel good about something and being productive. So, I mean, I wasn't like a unhappy kid. There wasn't really anything that happened to me that would have warranted those types of depressive symptoms. And when I say depressive symptoms, I'm talking about like the feeling of just like a whole heavy weight on your body, feeling hopeless, feeling like there's nothing to look forward to, feeling like no one cares about you, and just feeling a sense of like, why me? Like, why is everything bad happening to me? And I think I really started to struggle with that then. And things kind of in my personal world kind of got worse from there. I got a really bad knee injury, ended up on crutches for months. My mom ended up getting tuberculosis. She was in the ICU for 17 days, and her recovery was about 6 months of like the health department coming to our home every single day to watch her take her pills, and then like just like her body fatigue and like her just not feeling like herself for like the rest of that year. My grandpa got pneumonia, and my grandparents lived with me, and my grandma still lives with me. My grandpa's no longer with us, but in his final days, like I was one of his predominant caretakers. Like I had to carry his like collapsed body into my mom's Toyota Sienna to get him to the hospital at one point, all while I was still injured. I actually had mono as well. So I was like, I felt very fatigued and stuff. I skipped about a quarter of my junior year because I couldn't do it all. And my mom was so sick that she couldn't drive my brother and I, but at 16 in Kansas, you have a license. So I had a car and I drove my brother to school. I was in charge of 3 kids for carpool because I had to pick up those duties. Because my grandpa was sick, I was also getting the groceries. It was just like a lot for a 16-year-old to take on, all while trying to like, you know, maybe get into college someday, you know, and build a future for yourself. And at the time, I really wanted to go to medical school. Like that was always my plan. And so like you have to do all the volunteering and shadowing and research and all the things that you would have done to get into med school when you were an undergrad. So all of that kind of pressure on me was a lot. I think I burnt myself out very, very quickly. By the time I was 18 and in med school, I was just very, very miserable. I would say that by then, like I hadn't taken care of my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health. I feel like I didn't have good relationships with friends just because like I wasn't able to like do all of that. I was going to classes, I kind of hated it all. And I lost about 15 pounds, and I was only about 100 pounds to begin with. So I wasn't fitting into even like 23's size jeans, which is like usually the smallest size a brand might make. So I was really struggling with like even just like putting on clothes in the morning. I would be so weak that like if I had a multivitamin, I would throw up. I like could not get myself to go to classes. Like it was just like, if it was mandatory, I would get my body up and out because like I had to, but other than that, I was just really, really struggling with my health. And either the people around me either didn't know, or I wasn't sharing enough about it, or they thought I was being dramatic. Like I would tell my mom, but she just like, she was obviously sick herself still. So it wasn't like I had much support that way. And the reason I even chose the med program that I was in was because it was a 5-minute drive from my brother's school, and I could continue to help pick him up and drive him when needed and continue helping my family. My grandma was also heartbroken when my grandpa passed away. Like that was her person. And so I wanted to be close by for her because she and I were incredibly close. We even shared a bedroom growing up. And so I wanted to be there for my family. That was a part of my duty then. So that time was incredibly challenging. And really truthfully, like the best option back then for me would have been to take a gap year and to just like recover and focus on my health in all senses of the word, and rebuild like a support group and structure and like heal with my family. I hadn't even been given the opportunity to grieve my grandfather's death because it was just like go, go, go from then on after. So it was like a really lonely time, I would say. Just like kind of living in your own thoughts. And I remember my dorm room being right across from a construction zone. Sorry. And I just kept thinking that's like the easiest way out. And that's when my depressive thoughts kind of took a turn for the worst. And I would walk by this construction zone every single day, and I kept thinking that could be the solution to all of this. So I don't really know how I got through the rest of that year. But I was really, really lucky that my dad saw that I hated med school. And he never wanted me to be a doctor in the first place. He actually is a doctor himself, but he does a lot of administrative stuff, and he works a lot in policy, and he has such a cool like way of approaching medicine. As a profession, I really just wanted to do what he was doing, but he was like, I don't think that that's the right way. And I am so lucky because I had a really close family friend tell my parents, being a doctor is a huge waste of that girl's talent. And like, if he hadn't said that, and if my parents hadn't shared that with me, I wouldn't be doing what I am today. So that's kind of been a big part of my mindset since then. And ever since then, I realized, my dad said, well, what do you want to do? And I always said, like, you know, what I am really excited about is what's going on outside of like the patient room. Like if I had to go in a patient room, like my body would actually like tense up. I would get really dizzy. I would need to sit down. Like my body was telling me like, you don't want to be a clinician. This is not for you. So I feel like for the next few years, like what my symptoms sort of felt like were not as strong because I was kind of on a positive path. But I will say that during my master's program, I think a part of my coping mechanism was being almost a stranger to myself. And there was a really big disconnect between who I was at the time and like who I wanted to be. And I think that looking back on myself in those years, and maybe people that knew me at that time, like I'm not at all the same person, because I think I was having a hard time like coping with what I was doing, and it was just like a mental strategy for me to be someone other than myself. And I'm not fond of who I was at the time, but then I got a job opportunity in New York, and then things were starting to look like a new chapter for me. And I said, okay, I can become the person I want to be. But given the line of work I was in, working in fashion, I kind of had to change my personal style a little bit. And the way I was dressing really impacted also how I viewed myself and how I thought of myself. And it got to the point where I was evolving my style so much that I would look in the mirror and I didn't even recognize myself. And that's a really scary thing, especially for someone who has struggled with mental health in the past. And so it kind of brought back a lot of that in the environment that I was in. Brought up a lot of things from before and a lot of familiar sentiments. And I still didn't really talk about my struggles with anybody. I think like you know, my husband, my parents obviously knew that like I would go through waves of sadness, is what we called them, where I would have a lot of these depressive symptoms, like, you know, feelings of hopelessness. Maybe I wasn't eating as much. I was sleeping a lot more, just not who Slesha is. And so I would go through these waves, and that would pass maybe after a month or even a couple of weeks, and sometimes maybe even a day, like very inconsistent amounts of time. And I would come back into the girl that you're seeing today, you know, bright, bubbly, happy, you know, usually pretty friendly, alive, you know. And so, you know, those waves of sadness were always hard times, but I always knew that like it was only temporary and there would be something else. But it got to the point that like sometimes those waves were so low, and the wave got low enough that I ended up in a hospital. Like there was good reason to know that I wasn't safe to myself. And this was just before the pandemic, and yeah, again, same kind of feelings, like feeling hopeless, feeling like there's no one there for me, feeling very alone, feeling like there's no path forward, and feeling very stuck, and feeling like there's really nothing more. And I think being in the hospital, as scary and hard as that was, and it was really, really tough, because I gave my husband my phone when I got admitted, and I said, you can't let people figure out that I'm here. You need to keep texting people and messaging people like I'm still around. And so I'll never forget it. There was a kid that was like depending on me for like a career advice call. And I really wanted to do it, but I'm sitting there in a hospital. It's not like my husband can like imitate who I am and my advice that I could give. And so I still feel guilt that I'm carrying from that. I digress. So coming out of that experience, my husband and my mom and my dad were like, okay, this is serious. We didn't think it was serious before. We need to be her support system. And like, we also need to do a better job of like learning. What are these waves of sadness? What can we do to better support her? How can we help her get out of this? And I should note that these few years are like from the time I was in Baltimore through the time I started working in New York, I was modeling very little. It was a very small part of my life, maybe one booking a year, maybe nothing, because like my life was like school, work, you know, and there was no time for much of anything else at the time. So I really wasn't doing anything of what I loved and what brought me peace and what made me feel healthy and like the best version of myself. And so I think there was a lot of time of transformation and change just within my support circle at the time. I tried therapy. I've tried a few therapists. It is not for me. It only has brought me more trauma. And it got to the point where I had my husband sit in on sessions. I was like, we're starting fresh with this new therapist. Sit with me. I'm going to not be a filter. I'm going to say everything that's on my mind. I'm going to give her my whole story, and I would like for her to help me find coping strategies and coping mechanisms. Nothing. And she just wanted to keep like talking more about what was going on and how I was feeling that week. And like, my husband was like, I now see that this isn't going to be helpful for you.
So why bring him in? Was there like a feeling of like I'm not doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing, or like proving that you were like getting better? Like what was that like?
I think like what would happen is I would be in these sessions for therapy, and it would be alone. And like, I think I didn't maybe communicate very well with my family, like what those sessions were really like and what they were saying to me and what I was saying to them. So it got to the point where I was just like, I don't want to rehash everything I'm feeling and telling you again. Like, I just spent 4 hours crying, telling this woman my story. Like, fine, like I can do it again, but it's like, I don't think we're going to get value out of it unless like, it's too traumatic for me to keep rehashing everything. Can you just sit in the sessions with me? And like, I cleared it with a therapist first. I was like, it's not like I'm filtering anything. Like, you know, like he is a fly on the wall. Like, ignore him. I won't say anything that's different. Otherwise, I may not even say positive things about him. I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth when it comes out of my mouth. But I just want him to understand what's happening here.
Yeah.
And so he can better support me.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. like I get that whole feeling of like kind of wanting to be seen in that way too.
Yeah.
Because there are times where like I wasn't allowed to necessarily go to therapy. And like I definitely needed it. Like it was at a point where like the self-harm was like getting to a very like, I was only 15 and like doing things like that, and like my mom didn't understand how to handle it.
Yeah.
And like
Our parents don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really resonate with your story because like I dropped like 15 pounds, 20
Oh my
pounds or something like
gosh.
that in high school because I also was struggling with like anorexia and like weight issues, and like when I got on the scale, I would have to do like these check-ins about my weight, and my mom would like take my clothes off and like check to see if I had any more scars on my back, and like it was like that in and of itself was like really traumatizing to like kind of be, it's like, I mean, in the full extent of the word, naked, right?
Yeah,
like with your thoughts and your mind
everything.
and your body to your mom. And so when like, but I wanted her to like, even now I'm like, I want them to see me in what I'm doing now, like, and like see how like I'm talking about my struggles, because like that part is like, I think it's different when they see you when you're not natural, authentic self. Like right now, if my parents could like hear me talk about my own things, I wish I could, that in and of itself would bring me like so much feelings of being seen.
Yeah.
So I resonate with
Yeah.
that. I mean, I get why that might have happened.
Yeah, for sure.
But like when people's families aren't ready for you to go to therapy, or like let's say somebody, like therapy's not for them, right? Whether it's for the family, it's for the person.
Yeah.
What then?
So I personally turned to a few other techniques. One thing that was really beneficial for me was leaning into my spirituality, leaning into a notion of destiny. And I know that people have a lot of opinions on astrology, but for me, okay, great.
This is a Summer Solstice issue.
Okay. I love that. For me, I found a really great astrologer in the UK, and he has a really modern approach to astrology. And so he just did a simple birth chart reading, and we just started that way. And instead of focusing on present and future, he focused solely on my past. And he was able to, based on the placements of my planets, basically tell me my whole past. So it was reverse therapy. He was like, during this time, you probably had a lot of car issues. During this time, you may have struggled with family's health. During this time, like, you probably had a disconnect in mind, body, self. Like, everything that the planets were saying is truthfully what happened. But the beauty of it was, he's like, no one's life is peaches and daisies moving forward. He did not sugarcoat anything for me. And he just gave me a lot of hope for the future. And he said, look, like, you know, a lot of people have a lot of bad planets and a lot of bad places. You really only have 3, you know, coming up for the rest of your life. Like, the best is yet to come. The worst has passed. And just him sort of saying that, like, yeah, it's not going to be peaches and daisies. Like, you know, life happens. It's not going to be perfect. But like, you're through the worst of it, meant everything to me. And of course, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, he said in these few years, like, I might have a kid. Like, I'm not going to take that to heart. Think it's kind of cute, you know? But like, it's not like I'm going to be like, well, I have to have a kid in that time range, right? Like, I'm going to let my life happen the way that I want it to happen. But I also know in the back of my mind that there's hope for the future. And I think like that, in line with my spirituality, has like really been beneficial for me. I also like, I'm really grateful that, I mean, although I didn't kind of go to temple every Sunday or anything like that, my parents both are incredibly spiritual as well. Like, my dad was a yoga teacher. He truly believes in meditation. I personally have not meditated. That's something I might navigate down the road. But my mom also believes in a lot of like Buddhist kind of concepts and things. And so those are kind of things that I've kind of grown up with. And just being a firm believer in destiny, and it's not why me. It's, oh, maybe my planet was in a not great position that day. Because for a long time, I did just feel like bad things were only happening to me and not to other people. Because I think that when you have these depressive symptoms, like, you just feel like you're in a microscope, 1. 2, it's all like everyone else's life is great and yours is the only one that like you're struggling, you know? So I think that like I found a lot of like happiness and like just general peace from that. And then the other thing that I think has really helped me is my husband invented something called the 5 T's. And you're gonna have to bear with me because some of the T's are a little bit of a stretch. But one is like, talk it out. Do you need advice or do you just want someone to vent to? But either way, that's one method, is talking it out. Number 2, tuck in. Because my depressive symptoms are so linked to like sleeping, I've found that putting myself in like getting tucked in a warm blanket and just taking a nap is sometimes like enough for me to like get through the day. And sometimes that's all it is, like taking it day by day. Number 3 is a treat. And I smile because like there's nothing that makes me happier than a cup of chai. So like sometimes like that's what I need. I just need like a treat. Maybe I need like a cake or like Baked by Melissa cupcakes or something. Just something like you can't underestimate the power of like your favorite meal or your favorite drink or just your favorite anything that kind of gives you this sense of comfort and peace. Sometimes it's a big bowl of pasta. Like it's just whatever makes you feel good. Then there's a trickaroo, which could just be trick, but I think trickaroo sounds cuter. And it's where you distract yourself from whatever is going on. Maybe it's that you jam out to your favorite music. Maybe you are watching a TV show, but maybe you go somewhere. You go to the zoo or, you know, something fun. You do some sort of activity, and that kind of tricks you and tricks your mind from being able to think about it. And this is the one that's quite a stretch. Toodle. It's a cuddle, but with a T. Okay. There was like, there's a TikTok where there's this like Scottish baby. It's like, you need a toodle. And he's like, yes. It's basically just a cuddle. Like sometimes like you can't underestimate the value of a big hug, and Slesha means to hug or to embrace. And so I think it's a big part of my personal identity. And so we do something called a 360 toodle, which is like, he hugs me from all sides. Like he hugs me from the front, and then I turn to the side, I get a side one, and then a back one, and then another side. And so sometimes that just makes me feel better. I also have a therapy dog now. She comes from a long line of therapy dogs. Her name is Mia. She's a toy Sheltie. She is 1.5 years now. And whenever I am feeling anxious, she knows it. And she will apply pressure to my chest. And she's been like trained to do that, but she also started doing it instinctively at a very young age. But she's a big part of my mental health journey as well.
And it sounds like people are at least listening and hearing out like what are the things that you need.
Yeah.
But it takes a long time to communicate your needs like that.
Yeah.
I asked myself a question like, what are my needs from my friends? And I think like that opened up the whole thought process of like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I know what I don't need.
Right.
But I have no idea what I do need.
Yeah.
And I get upset when they don't deliver.
Yes.
And it's like do I have a right to be upset? And it's like that whole thing kind of.
Yeah.
So how did you identify these? I mean, I don't know if you helped in developing the 5 T's.
I did.
But like, how did you kind of figure out what you needed?
Oh, that is such a good question. My biggest advice to people is be kind to yourself and take time to figure out what works for you. Therapy did not work for me. Might work great for someone else. Journaling, my biggest no-no. If I journal, it is only going to be to my detriment. If somebody recommends journaling to me, I might slap them in the face. Like, it is just not for me. Take time to figure out what works for you, and if anything even brings you a slight ounce of comfort, lean into that and try to like investigate that more, despite what anyone else might think of you.
So needs are like one of those questions that I feel like we have a lot of onus to figure out what our needs are on our own, right? Like, okay, and yes, it is definitely like our responsibility to handle our mental health and like figure out like what our needs are. Has anyone helped you on that journey of figuring it out?
Yeah, my husband has been instrumental in helping me figure this out. Like, he will present all the ideas on the table for me and like help me kind of navigate how I'm feeling about each one. And that's kind of how we developed the 5 T's. I mean, he really invented it, but like, I mean, we did develop it together in some way. And like, I think that when you're struggling with your mental health, your thoughts can get kind of cluttered and it's really hard to dissect them. He's an engineer by like education, and so I think he's very gifted in breaking down problems and like making them very digestible. He's also a management consultant today, so his like job is to help fix very complicated problems with millions of dollars on the line. And so like with this, it's like my life is on the line, right? Like my health, our future together is on the line. And so he's very comfortable with tackling really challenging problems. And I think that I have just been really, really lucky that my like life partner that I've had since I was in high school, someone that I've been with for 13 and a half years now, almost 14 years, who has seen my whole path and has seen my whole journey, knows me well enough to sort of support me in that way. because I think like he supports me in ways that my parents could never and my friends could never.
Yeah.
So I've been really lucky that I've had kind of a thought partner through it all. I think it's near impossible to be able to do it yourself. But I think that if you don't have someone like my husband in your life, then I think it's like what you have to do is kind of start day by day and piece by piece. Like for me, I found that cooking is very exciting for me. I didn't know how to cook before the pandemic, but it allows me to feel in control. It's something that you really have to focus on, so it takes your mind off of other things, and at the end of it, you get to eat whatever you made. So there's like all just like win-win-wins for me, and I don't look at it as like a chore. Like it's actually, I love doing it. And so that's one thing that was really exciting for me. Like I think that like my modeling career also has been like something that has really helped my mental health. Just seeing like a bigger reason and a bigger picture for it and feeling like I'm doing what I was always meant to be doing is also really cool. I feel like it forces me to like wake up and do my skincare and like, you know, I mean, I want to say I eat healthy, but I don't really. Like I eat what I want to eat because like I had an agent once tell me like, you don't need to be a certain size. Be who you are and we will make the rest happen. And like, that was like the most freeing thing in the world. I'm not like, oh, I can only eat a salad today. Like I've never felt that way. And so I think that I'm like really lucky that I'm in like a really healthy profession that has allowed me to kind of focus on my health and prioritize my health more than I would have otherwise in any other job.
So kind of shifting gears a little bit, do you feel, I'll just ask you straight up, do you feel supported by the Brown community? And, you know, I'll start there. Do you feel supported by the Brown community?
I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that my personal network, my in-laws and parents is like friends and family, my personal friends, like my circle of a Brown community is incredibly supportive, and they remind me every single day, like why what I'm doing matters. And like the salary that comes with it isn't as important as like the broader messaging. And they keep me going every day. But I would say no, because I think that oftentimes in the Brown community, we're under a microscope. And I think a lot of people, like the second you share something about what you're planning on doing, it's like, oh, did she succeed? I feel like I have some friends that are like, oh, I'm applying to med schools. And like, there's suddenly like, everyone's talking about, oh, where's this kid going to med school? Well, it's like, what if they don't get into med school? Like, imagine how they're going to feel about that. I think that we could all be kinder and not as judgy and not as so focused on others in our community. I think that if we all just focused on ourselves a little bit more and like, you know, I also don't feel like you need to share everything about your life. Like there have been so many trips that my husband and I have been on that like we've never talked about, we've never posted pictures from. Like it's okay to like keep things to yourself and not have it out there for the world.
Yeah, I agree.
I say that as someone who's spilling my whole like life out right now, but
like yeah. Like, I think it's because, you know, there's a difference in like sharing, the intentionality of sharing.
Yeah.
Instead of like, I need clout.
Yes.
That's why I'm sharing.
Yes.
Right? There's a whole different, I mean, because if you post every single day, you are going to do well on Instagram, right?
Yeah, of course.
It's just going to happen. That consistency is going to work for you.
Yeah.
And that's why some people post,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they make their life, and we all have fallen into this trap at least for 1 minute.
Of course.
You know, like,
yeah.
well, how am I going to make my life more Instagram worthy or my life more TikTok worthy? Like,
Yeah.
That has definitely crossed my mind in the last.
Like when I'm shopping, I'm like, will this be cute? Like, I don't know.
I'll look on camera.
Yeah.
I'll look on camera.
Exactly.
And it's a lot of things. I think a lot of pressure that we go through as women too.
Yeah.
So the social media Brown space.
Yes.
How do you feel?
I feel that I'm in the middle of two worlds because as a model, I am not a content creator, but I often get looped into that group, or people that are in the content creation space get looped into like what people think is modeling. And so there's like a little bit of like border there, but I'm a nobody relative to content creators. Like people don't know me. Like for a lot of my content creator friends, like if they walk down the street, they would get recognized. For me, I'm never gonna get recognized. Like that's, I think, the beauty of being a model is it's not about you. Like no one's gonna recognize you. It's about what you represent. It's not about your audience. And so like I kind of like not having too much of a following. I like that it's just like a smaller kind of community that I have. But because I'm kind of in between, like I also have friends that have like almost no social media or maybe very little following or just their homies, friends and family. And I think that sometimes like we can judge on both ends. Like people are like, why aren't you posting? Or people are like, why do you post? You know, and so I feel like sometimes I'm caught in the middle in this social media realm. My agencies and my clients couldn't care less if I don't post, because there has not yet been a modeling agreement where you're like, okay, you are shooting a brand campaign, you're gonna be on set for 12 hours, but also we expect you to do a post and 3 stories. Like that's just not how our like job is structured and how our payment is structured in any way, shape, or form. When you are on set as a model, you have no expectations to post that because they don't care about your following. In fact, they prefer that you don't post any of that because you're now like giving out their secrets of what their, you know, setup might look like or anything like that. And so I feel very conflicted a lot of times. Like as a model, you are not to have your phone out on set. Like I don't have my phone out even here, despite this being like a little bit more of an intimate setting. It's just nature for me. So I do feel kind of like caught in the middle a little bit. I am loving that so many of my content creator friends have brought so much positive light to the South Asian space and like just to what South Asians can do like as a culture and like how beautiful like our culture is. And in that part, like you can see it, like I can't fight the smile, like that makes me really excited and really, really happy. What I hate is when people are like, oh, why is she posting? Like she thinks she's all that.
Yeah.
I think we can be less judgy.
We definitely have a lot of that
Yeah.
in our community. And I find, have you found it to be easier or more difficult to make more like positive, nourishing friendships since becoming a model? Or has it been like, these are my friends, these are my people, and this is who I stick to?
I think that through modeling, because I've made so many other South Asian friends in the space and other creatives, like they understand my world and it can be a really lonely space. And so having friends that like understand the creative side and like understand my world has brought me so much peace. And like it's so comforting to have those people and I would never trade them for the world. But a part of me feels like I would have never found that comfort if I was still 6th grade Slesha, who was super ugly, bullied a lot, frizzy hair, face full of acne, tons of like huge braces. Like kids would literally be like, Mom, she's scary. Like I had a kid say that to me once. And like, I knew I was hideous. Like I knew I was a pain to the eye.
Oh my God.
Like actually a pain to the eye. Like the kid was scared of me because he thought I was that level of ugly. So sometimes I wonder if I still looked like that, like would I still have the same friends? And I think I struggle with that sometimes. Like, do you like me because I'm a model or do you like me for me being Slesha? Mm-hmm. So I will say that in regards to what makes me feel complete, I think I don't know anyone that has completely solved that answer. I think we all struggle with something. And I think being a very ambitious and motivated person, like as a part of my like true core identity, I will probably never feel like I'm enough. And I will always want more for myself. But I think that what has brought me a lot of comfort is one, having a really strong support system. Like my personal unit that I live with is like my husband and my dog, and they both know how to support me best. My dog especially, like her cute little jumps, like even on like a day when I'm really busy is just like really cute. Her dad is an agility champion. And so like, it's just like, it's adorable. Like she just is like the perfect animal for me. And like, I do feel like I'm a better human, I'm better off, like because she has like enriched my life in that way. And I'm just grateful for the years that I will have with her. That is something that will probably always bring my heart joy and make me feel good and safe, like looking back on every memory I've had with her and will continue to have with her in the coming years. And of course the 5 T's has like really helped me a lot, but I think like every single day is like kind of like, I'd like to take things day by day. And especially given how hectic my schedule has been with my modeling career, like I do have to like take it day by day and just like tune in with myself, know that I have a support system, know that the worst is over, and know that I have a lot to look forward to. And knowing that every single day, like I'm actually doing what I want to do in life, like I think that has become a big change.
Yeah. So here's a little off-tangent question. So you mentioned this last part, and that's something that I feel like a lot of people, including myself, struggle with, like doing what they love,
Mm-hmm.
right, as a career.
Yeah.
And that is a difficult thing in our like community,
Oh,
right,
yes.
in our culture,
Mm-hmm.
doing what it is that you love to do. And you feel the most amount of dissonance when you are doing something that you don't want to do.
Oh.
Right? There's
Yeah.
like almost like at the time when when it's happening, there's literally nothing worse
Nothing
than
worse.
wanting to leave a place because you hate that this is your job.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and this is more of like a thought question, not like something that I'm, needing like a specific answer, but it's more just like, when do we say that our profession isn't our identity? Or do we say that our profession isn't our identity? Like how do you balance kind of not deriving your entire self-worth from that title, but then also striving for that title?
It's near impossible.
Right?
Because like when you meet someone new, you're like, oh, like what's your name? What do you do? Because like you're using that to kind of figure that person out. And that's one of the things that I hate about how like as a society, we tend to try to understand someone just purely based off of that. One thing I really admire about my best friend is that she has never once cared what anyone does. Like she just wants to know like, what kind of music do you like? What kind of food do you like? Do you like margaritas? Like that's who she is. And like, I think the world would be a lot better of a place if everyone was more like that. Like she's all about love, like doesn't really care. She's South Asian too, she's Telugu. Couldn't care less what people make. Like, I mean, I just think that is such a beautiful quality. But I think like, yeah, we do tie a lot of our identity to our professions, and it's always going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah.
It consumes so much of our life, right? Like, we're there every day pretty much. We had to like work to get into that career to begin with. So it's tough.
Yeah. But there's a balance.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And like how do you do that?
I think what you give your mind to is how you should identify yourself. Like if your mind space is like always on like maybe literature, like I have friends that love to read, like let that be your identity.
Yeah. I love that. All right. I want to ask you two main questions.
Yes.
What is your duty?
I love this question so much because I think of duty as like my personal mission. And I've been thinking about my personal mission a lot since I took a marketing class in my master's program with my professor, Greg Condarasi. And he said, I want you to think about what is your personal mission. And later when I was in my first job, my mentor said to me, whatever it is that bothers you, go for that. Follow that and let that kind of inspire your career path. So for me, and because of my past, in 2015, I changed my Instagram bio to wherever you go, bring sparkle. And that is my duty. Wherever I go, I want to bring sparkle to the room. I want to uplift those around me. I want to hear about their stories. I want to get hyped up. I want to get energized. Like, I want to hear what their life has been like, because like there's nothing that enriches me more and makes me feel more alive than like hearing about someone else's life, what they're doing, what they're wanting to go after, what they're interested in. And so I think like me just bringing that side of my personality out is like really what my duty is. I'm with a different team almost every day. And so I'm really lucky to get a lot of new fresh faces all the time. But I had a mentor once tell me like, don't underestimate like the power that you have when you walk into a room. And that really resonated with me a lot.
I love that answer.
Thank you.
That's the cutest answer ever. And I can't wait to print that. I'll tell you offline. What is your duty to your culture?
My duty to my culture, this is a huge one for me because I have some friends from my med school days who've said, you are the textbook person for like the person that has left med school, completely flipped their life around and has like done an okay job of like doing that. And so like I want to like really harness that, like break generational toxicity as much as I possibly can in my personal life, or like, giving advice to others. I think it's important to be in this space and also lend that hand back down to anyone that wants to be in the creative space. Like if there's someone that I know, or if there's something that I could personally do, like that is a huge part of my mission. I've had a few people reach out to me on Instagram and ask like, hey, like how can I get more involved in modeling? Like how do I break into the space? How do I talk to my parents? How do I deal with the judgment from the brown community of me trying to pursue this? And that is like what fuels me. Like I get so excited to help more people because again, it goes back to like, you know, fighting that like unconscious bias that people may have, like when they see a brown person. Like I don't want us to be a directional choice. And more South Asians in this space means that we're fighting that every day. Like I don't see any competition. I'm not a gatekeeper. If a client likes you and me, they're gonna book both of us. Like that's just how it is. Maybe not for the same shoot. Maybe you'll get picked this month and I'll get picked next month, but we're both gonna end up winning. And I think there's space for all of us, and every South Asian in this space can succeed. And so I think that's a huge duty to my culture, is like continuing on like this kind of boldness and this bravery and this like courage and strength. Like I always look to like my grandparents, like my grandpa's sister was the first to leave their village in Gujarat. She wears a 2-piece swimsuit. Like lives in New Jersey, wears a 2-piece swimsuit. Like what ba do you know that does that? Right? Like that is bold, that is brave, and that is who I want to be like when I'm older. Like don't care what anyone thinks, go after what you want, and like the rest will follow.
Cut.